Right, it's begun. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hello everyone. I am Aditya Jain. I'll be doing a short presentation on my project topic, which was a review of Keldysh formalism. Thank you, Professor Chumen, for giving me this nice topic. It was very interesting to work on and study. So, okay, let's begin. So Keldysh formalism is basically an extended version of quantum field theory that we generally study. So in quantum field theory, what we have is quantum field theory in general has been studied very quite extensively, right? And so quantum field theory, and by quantum field theory, I mean the standard quantum field theory, the equilibrium one, which is usually done at zero temperature. So it has been done extensively, right? But the ironic part is that most of the quantum systems that are physically manifest themselves, they're generally non out of equilibrium, right? And we need to make sure that we somehow include those as well, right? So that's why we need to study non-equilibrium part of out of equilibrium quantum field theories, and to do that, Keldysh formalism is a way out, right? Right, if we have, let's say, irreversible processes, that'll be a non-equilibrium uh, potential kind of a thing. And we'll talk about non-equilibrium things in general in a while. But first, I need to set up some context on quantum field theory itself. Right. So in a quantum field theory, what we do is we try to calculate something called the vacuum expectation values. Right. We try to calculate vacuum expectation values of observables. Right. Let's say we have an observable which represents a physical quantity. What we do is we denote an operator to it. Okay, and we take the expectation value, uh, which is the the average of that observable over all the states in the Hilbert space. So we denote it like this, right? This can be extended to something called correlation functions, and one of the most uh, common examples would be the uh, the Green's function that we study. Uh, Something like this. This is operators now. Okay, this is the time ordering thing. This is time ordering because we want to order the. I think it just the time ordering comes in when we perturbatively expand the S matrix, which we'll get into right now. So this is one of the most common expectation values or correlation functions, and these psi's are uh, these are operators which obey the Fermi-Dirac statistics. Okay, so these would represent fermions, for example. Um, for example, you can think of the psi dagger as um, insertion of an electron, and then psi would be removal of an electron. Okay, so in annihilation and creation operators as well. Okay, so this is what we want to study, right? So I'll explain the quantum field theoretic part, the equilibrium part, and then we'll go to the non-equilibrium thing. So in equilibrium, what happens is we have uh, we have, let's say, the Schrodinger picture. We have the Schrodinger picture where a state, let's say like this, would evolve like this. Okay, this is the evolution operator. Okay, these are states in the Schrodinger picture. These are states at time t and t prime. Uh, we can have another picture which is called the Heisenberg picture, and in the Heisenberg picture, the states do not time evolve at all. So we could just write this t prime. Okay, but the most important picture, which actually encompasses both of these as a limiting case, is the interaction picture. So what we do is we define our Hamiltonian as h naught plus h prime. So this is like the free part. This is the time independent perturbative part. Okay, we take it as a weak perturbation so that we can perturbatively expand in this kind of a thing. Okay, this is like the perturbation. And usually what happens in quantum field theory, we have all the time dependence in this thing. Sorry, no, there's no real time dependence in the equilibrium time, sorry, in the equilibrium quantum field theory. But in non-equilibrium, we can have time dependence in any of these. Okay, so again, this thing contains products of fields and derivatives of field and stuff like this. Okay, so this is the Heisenberg picture. So the third and the most important picture is the interaction picture. And in the interaction picture, what we have is the state would evolve as such. So we'll have something like this. Okay, so you can see something happening. So if you okay, so let me write this as this. I could write this as, let's say, S T T prime, where I'm defining the this thing to be an something like this, and we'll call this thing the S matrix and this thing the evolution operator, and they both have uh, explicit forms. So U, the evolution operator, could be written as the time ordered product of, or time ordered exponential, and then minus I from t prime to t, and then we take the total Hamiltonian, the full Hamiltonian, and we integrate it. Okay, this t is the time, again the time ordering, right? And this S, the S matrix, what we're calling the S matrix, can be written as S, sorry, the time ordered ex, exponential minus I. By the way, these all contain h bar as well, but I'm suppressing the h bar. I mean, putting h bar to be 1, because we'll not be studying any classical cases, so we don't need to include any h bars. Right, so we have t prime to t, and what I'll have is h prime hat, and this h prime hat is the perturbation, but it's in the interaction picture. Okay, can you guys see my screen like completely, or is it small? Just could one of you?
No, I can see it. It's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, thank you. Right, right. So this is the interaction picture perturbation, right? So this is what we have. Now what we do is we write is what we can do is we can write this correlation function that I written down, right? This correlation function, using all this, using the interaction picture, I can write it down as such. I can write it down as. So I'll use another terminology. I'll use a shorthand notation, which I've used in my report as well. Instead of x and t and x prime and t prime, I'll just use 1 and 1 prime. Okay. So what I'll do is, so we have this thing, right? And the expectation value is over field, right? Usually these fields. And so what we'll do is we'll use the interaction picture. And again, I cannot really go in every detail because of the limited time. So I'll just write it as such. Or actually I can, I should write this. So I'll write 1 and 1 prime, right? That should be okay. So let's see. So this expression is usually read from right to left. So we have the asymptotical past state, right? This phi at minus infinity, and what we do is we time ordered evolve it from negative infinity to infinity with insertions at t and t prime, right? And then we take its product with the state at the infinite, asymptotically in future state, right? So this is usually what's done in quantum field theory. And now also this is called the in-out formalism. In-out formalism. Because we're taking it at in and then computing it at out. Okay, so now what we do, the next step is which is the most important step, which is going to differentiate the equilibrium and the non-equilibrium part. And that is that the asymptotic past state and asymptotic future state in an equilibrium QFT are the same. So by same, I mean that they differ by just a factor, a phase factor, right? And the reason for this is the adiabatic theorem. When we use equilibrium QFT, we say that the perturbation that we're turning on, right? This perturbation is turned on and off adiabatically, which means it's done is done so slowly that the state does not change. Okay, which gives us these two states to be differing by just a phase factor. When we do that, what we can do is we can write this as we can okay. So when we use that, okay, so I'll use my report then. Right, so they differ only by phase factor in equilibrium. And so what we can do is we can write this kind of a thing. Right, we write them as different differed by a phase factor. We define the phase factor using the S matrix, and then we can write this.
Can you please zoom this page a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Is that fine?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So right, so we can use this, and let's see what this means. So we have on the left side this thing, and on the right side this thing, and they're both defined. They're both defined. Where is it defined? Yeah, there we go. They're both defined to be the asymptotic past state, and now you can see that this is nothing but an expectation value, right? We now have both of these state on the asymptotic past, and in the interior, what we're trying to calculate is we take the S matrix from negative infinity to infinity, and we insert the operators psi and psi dagger at t and t prime, right, and x prime for all that matters, right, and that is divided by the same thing, but now we don't have any operator insertions. Okay, this is the Feynman prescription, not the. Okay, so that statement is not correct. This is the Feynman formalism to do the quantum field theory, and what we do is we just, if you remember, this S was written as such, right? This is an exponential, and what we do is we expand it. And I said that this was a weak interaction, right? It was a weak field. So what we do is we expand it. When we expand it, we get different orders of expansion, and we get something called Feynman diagrams. Okay. For lack of time, I cannot obviously go into that. And the denominator, as you can see, the denominator is going to give you something called disconnected diagrams. Okay. So what we do is we expand this. We use Wick's theorem, which uses normal ordering to get rid of the fields and just gives us contractions, something called contractions, which we can represent in terms of Feynman diagrams. Okay. The denominator gives us something called disconnected diagrams. And so the cancellation that we have in the numerator and the denominator is done by just removing the disconnected parts. Okay, right. So again, so for people who have seen the quantum field theoretic formalism, they would recognize this very easily. Right. So this is the equilibrium part. Right. In non-equilibrium, we don't have the luxury of saying this. The asymptotic past and the future states are not the same. We cannot really just put them to be equal to be as differing by just a phase factor. Okay, and so we need to circumvent this problem somehow, but not like this. So what we do, so this was done by Schwinger. This was done by Schwinger and then Keldysh and some more people. So this was done by Schwinger at t equals 0, but then it was extended to any t by using any equilibrium density matrix by Kadanoff and Bayes. Okay, so I'll still stick to the Schwinger-Keldysh formalism. So Schwinger did it first, but Keldysh was the one who popularized it and actually gave it a diagrammatic techniques. So what they did was in the Feynman prescription, in the Feynman formalism, we have negative infinity, we evolve it to infinity, right? And that's all the insertions, right? And then we do the expectation value. What Keldysh did was, or what Schwinger did, or what they all did together was they took they took the contour going from negative infinity to infinity and then back to negative infinity. Okay, and so this kind of a thing is removed. Okay, and we don't really need the adiabatic because we're including the S matrix. Okay, so we'll have something like this. We'll have something like this now. So what we have done, we just added the S matrix part. And now one could naively say that how about we put this in this, get rid of the S matrix at like for all times. But that is not true. The S matrix is time ordered and it's in this time ordered in this way. And time ordering would mean that we have to first evaluate the minus infinity to infinity S matrix. And then since this thing is out of that time ordering, it's done later. So we have to first go, okay, so this figure would help. We have to first go from negative infinity to infinity and then come back from from infinity to back to negative infinity, right? And so we cannot just remove the S matrix because that's what contains the evolution. Right. So this is called the Keldysh closed time contour or the Schwinger Keldysh contour. Right. And that's what we're going to use for our non-equilibrium case. Right. And now again, so this can be done, this can be written very shorthand notation if we just use something called a contour or ordering operator. Remember we first had the time ordering operator, right, which was given as T. We can have a contour ordering operator, which is TC, which what it says is uh, any insertions at this point would come before, let's say, this point. And now you can see that this T and this T prime are the same time axis, right? But they're not. It's like a copy of the time axis pasted onto itself. Right, the TC would take care of this. The TC would evaluate this first and then this. Okay, the T sub C, the contour ordering operator. Okay, so we can write it that as such. Again, this includes the S matrix. Okay, but now it's a contour over C, over this whole C. Okay, everything remains the same. Everything remains the same except the contour has changed now. Now what we do is when we expand this thing, the S matrix that is, we get something called Dyson equation. Okay, again, quantum field. If you're equipped with the quantum field theory, you would know all these terms and probably like the back of your hand. So we get something like this. Okay, or this. These two are pretty much the same, but we just we have changed the order of these. G0 is the Green's function for the unperturbed Hamiltonian. Okay, so it's like we are using the perturbation uh, as a perturbation, right? We're expanding in terms of the perturbation. Okay, so we have some things like this, and they look exactly like the equilibrium things, except now we have the contour here. The contour is C. It's not from negative infinity to infinity. It's a contour. It's from negative infinity back to negative infinity. Okay, and these ones and twos and threes are just defined as these. They are their whole space-time integrals. Okay, so now what we can do is we can have the Green's function that we're looking at actually contains 4 types of Green functions. Okay, let's see. Let me move this. What we can have is we can have, first of all, both T and T prime could be here and here, right? The time ordering would just take care of it then. The time ordering would take care of it. So T and T prime. Right, we can just include a time ordering and that'll be simply done, right? T is less than T prime. What we can also have, this is by the way C plus, the plus contour, and this is the C minus, the negative contour, which is going back to negative infinity. If now we have insertions on T and T prime on the C minus part of the contour, right, we'll need to have something called the anti-time ordering. Okay, because this is evaluated like this, but this one is evaluated like this. So this anti-time ordering would make sure that the t prime is evaluated first and then t. Okay, but we can also have more things. We can have insertions first at this and then this. Now, if you look clearly, if you look closely, it looks like t is smaller than t prime, right? And it is, even in the contour sense. Right, now the TC would take care of this, and it would evaluate t first and then t prime. Okay, this is called the G smaller or G lesser. And last, what we can do is, by the way, the first and the second ones were called GC and GC bar, just for the contour Green's function. The last thing that remains is we can have t here and then t prime here. Now again, it looks like t is smaller than t prime, right? It is. But in the contour sense, in the Keldysh contour sense, t prime has to be evaluated first. And again, TC would take care of this. Okay, so it would evaluate t prime first, the insertion at t prime, and then the insertion at t. This is called the G greater function. Okay, so we have four functions now. And these are there they are, and we can write them in terms of the fields that we had, the field operators that we had defined, and they would look something like this. I really don't want to go into like how they're made and stuff, but yeah, it's pretty much what I just explained. Okay, and now what we do is we define the retarded and advanced Green's function by just looking at combinations of these. Okay, actually what happens is we have four of these, right? And so these four are not independent. Okay, the C and C bar and the lesser and the greater function, they are uh, we can have an equation about them. I think it's C plus C bar and is equal to uh, the lesser and the greater. I think so, something like that. Right. But that is very trivial to see. Okay, so what we need to have three functions, and these are the three functions. We have the retarded, the advanced, and something called the Keldysh-Green functions, which we won't need in this paper, but it's important to when we have any applications. Okay, this is something called the Larkin Ovchinnikov representation. Okay, so the reason to define these things was to see the equivalence with the equilibrium Green's function. Okay, recall that we had the Dyson equations, right? And if you look in the Dyson equations, we have something called convolution integrals, right? We have G0, which is again a function in itself, G, and there's, wait, did I write this incorrectly? Oh, I think I wrote this incorrectly. It should be a 2. My bad. It should be a 2. Okay, so these are convolution integrals, right? We are evaluating them for a range of values, right? I mean, I don't know how to describe a convolution integral, but yeah. And again, this we can look at this. This involves two convolution integrals, right? So we have 1, 2, and then 2, 3 are both taken as a range, and then they're evaluated. So we have convolution integrals which are defined over the closed contour. So we need to somehow do that, right? So that's why we're doing this representation. Okay, this Larkin Ovchinnikov representation. Okay, so to move on and to actually do those convolution integrals, we have something called Langren's rules. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll first look at how the lesser, greater, retarded, or advanced functions, which are represented as convolution integrals, they evaluate, right? And then we can generalize to any kind of a Green's function, right? So to do that, what we'll do to do that, right? Let's see. So we have lived something like this, right? Something like this, something like this of a contour. We have T and let's say t prime, and this can go to infinity, but you don't need to really go to infinity because you'll have to come back without any other insertion, right? So you can pretty much stop at t prime. So now what we do is we have this kind of a thing. And now what we do is we deform the contour. We deform the contour as such. So what we do is we first go to t, come back to minus infinity again, go to t prime. So what we do is we start from negative infinity, go to t, right? Do the insertion at t, go back to minus infinity, come back to t prime, do the insertion, and go back to negative infinity. It's the same. It's the same integration. Okay. Let's say this one is C1, the going to T and back, and let's say this is C1 prime, which is going to T prime and back. Okay, and now we do the integral, the convolution integral on this contour. And when we do that, what we can do is we can see that this thing on the C1 contour, tau is always going to be less than T prime, right? Always going to be less than T prime, because tau would be restricted to this contour, and T prime is there. So it's always going to be smaller than T prime. And so what we can do is instead of B, we can write it as B smaller, the B lesser function, right? Which was this function, right?
Aditya, a few more minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty much done, like in like 5 minutes. So, right, so we do this, and we continue like this, and then we look at the C1 prime function, the C1 prime contour, and then we'll have to replace the A with the A lesser. Okay, and we can continue with this. We use the retarded functions definition, and what we'll find is we can write the C lesser function as a convolution of these two. But the best part is we now have changed from the contour integration, the closed time contour integration, to a real time axis integration, which we know and love, and we can do whenever we want, right? And like we can move on similarly, and we can pretty much generalize to any function. We can do a product of three functions. We can figure out the lesser or the greater. The greater is just, we can just change the lessers, all the lessers to the greater function, and it's just the greater function. Okay, and we can also calculate the retarded and the advanced functions as well. Similar, very similar uh, analysis. And these are some of the rules that are written down. Okay, these are called Langridge's rules. But on the left side, we have the contour, the closed time contour integration. On the right hand side, we have the real time axis configuration. Okay, so that's the important thing. And so this is pretty much it. That's all we really need. Right, and now what we do is we look at the Green's function in the Dyson equation. If we look at just the retarded and advanced things, right, they just look like this, because the retarded and advanced just look as they are. There's no other term involved, right? And this looks exactly like the equilibrium functions. So these are just the equilibrium functions. Okay, whatever the equilibrium quantum field theory defines, this is exactly that. The important part is these functions, the lesser and the greater ones, because they have more functional forms in there, right? And these equations are called Keldysh equations, because now they're being evolved for these functions. These are called, by the way, self energies. Okay, these sigmas. The U is the potential, the non-equilibrium potential that we add. Okay, these are called Keldysh equations, and we can iterate them by using G0. Sorry, by using G on the right hand side, right? So you have this thing, and then instead of this thing, you have this thing again, and then you iterate it again and again and again. Okay, but again, just to make everything clear, all these terms, they're again convolution integrals like this. Okay, so they might look very small and harmless, but they're actually integrals that one has to calculate, evaluate in its own self, right? When you do the iteration, when you reach the infinite order iterate, we get something like this, and this is the general form of Keldysh equation that one uses to find the non-equilibrium diagrammatic the Feynman diagrams for non-equilibrium things, right? I've not done the diagrammatic technique here because that would have taken me 5 more pages and like half an hour more to talk about it. But yeah, so what one does is these are used in mesoscopic quantum transport. What we do is we use like finite size systems, right? We have inhomogeneities of spatial and the temporal kind, and what we do is uh, we take discrete sites, right? And these what happens is these green function would change into matrices, like finite matrices, and this Keldysh equation is then a matrix equation. And then it's just a matter of solving that matrix equation to find the Green's function, right? This is done very nicely in Alex Kamenev's book. I've added the reference, the second reference, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That is the whole formalism. So again, I've not added any application that seems very anticlimactic to have a formalism but not add any applications. But I tried my best. I could not add it without like 5 more pages. Trust me. So yeah, the formalism looks very trivial or intuitive in general, but the applications need a lot of rigor, honestly. So yeah, this kind of concludes my presentation. And yes, so yeah, if there are any questions, please go on.
Okay, thank you, Aditya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions?
Maybe I can ask a quick question.
Yeah,
Sure.
So yeah, related to applications. So
Mhm.
what is the physical reason why starting from past infinity, you want to go back to past infinity? Like in the usual Feynman path integral, for example, when you're doing usual quantum field theory, you want to study time evolution from some initial state to a final state,
Right.
and use the usual formalism.
Right.
In this case, what is the reason that you want to go back to minus infinity? What are the kind of physical quantities you would want to compute? And is this more general or more special compared to the usual?
Okay, so in the Feynman formalism, what we do is we want to calculate from negative infinity to infinity, right? That is done by the S matrix, the evolution.
Mm-hmm.
But we again go back to the minus infinity state and then divide by the disconnected diagrams to calculate the expectation values. Here, what we do is we need the non-equilibrium part, and we cannot go back to the negative infinity state by just dividing by a phase factor.
Now, why is that?
Because the non-equilibrium potentials cannot be added adiabatically. They have like we can have a delta potential.
Adiabatically. Sorry, the usual way of doing perturbative quantum field theory,
Right.
where you divide out by these things and the bubble diagrams get cancelled. That relies on weak perturbation, but it doesn't rely on, as far as I know, any adiabaticity assumption, does it?
It does.
Huh?
I think it does, because that's why we can write something like this. That's why we can write something like this, right?
Equation 12.
Equation 11 and 12. So we have something like this, right? And if you invert this thing with the S matrix, we can have this thing, and then we can divide it.
Switched on and off adiabatically. Sorry, this looks like you're just saying you have a localized interaction. So your past and future states are essentially free states. That is an assumption.
Yes.
It's true.
Yeah.
That is not quite adiabaticity, right? I mean, in between, you could have like a non-equilibrium process happening, right?
Right, but again, the non-equilibrium part would take away the adiabatic, right? Sorry, it would take away. It would change the state. It would not be the same state anymore if it's not done adiabatically.
It will, but eventually, if you have a case where, some non-equilibrium dynamics happens, but then eventually in the far future, again, things are free. There is no interaction.
Right. That's exactly what we want. We need the free state. But the thing is, it's a free state, but it's not the same state anymore. So it's not changed by a phase factor. It could be a free state, but it's a different state altogether.
And for that, you need a non-equilibrium process. Okay, maybe we can discuss this later. I think.
Right. Okay.
I think the problem there is this phase factor is not under control. So it may come back to the same state, but there could be an extra phase factor. This division takes care of that. But in the Keldysh formalism, one can get rid of that by coming back to the past.
I see.
But more than that, there are now both the forward and the backward path.
Right.
But we don't see any backward path. Nothing, even for hydrogen. We don't have to go to perturbative scheme. Even if we take just H, which is you called free, there also I can take the forward path and the backward path. So in quantum mechanics, where is that backward path?
What do you mean? Where is that backward path?
No, this contour.
Right.
Suppose I solve any quantum mechanics problem.
Right.
And then our time evolution is forward in time.
Right.
But Keldy should say that you want to calculate something, you also need the backward path.
Right.
And the whole formulation will go through in a quantum mechanics formulation.
Right.
It need not be field theory. But then where is this, for example, Schrodinger equation and so on? We don't need this backward path anywhere.
Yeah, we don't need it, but what's happening is we include it so that we can have an expectation value on the same state. Right, we start with the past state and we want to evaluate it on the past state as well. So that's why we go forward and then backwards. But again, we need to formalize
this thing. The whole thing is because of this unitary operator. You do its inverse, and it's an identity.
Right.
Okay.
But it's time ordered, and we have insertions in between. That's why we cannot just remove it. Right.
Yeah, only time ordered you can. If they're out of time ordered, you would need at least one fold.
Yeah.
In general, more. So actually, that is one of the main, I think, advantages of this formalism, that gives you a practical way of computing out of time ordered correlators. You want to do that in perturbation theory.
I actually did not see out of time ordered study on these things, but again, that could be a very nice application.
One of the and recently, I think, much studied thing also.
Right. I also saw this is called something. This is something called the in formalism. I think something recently has been done on cosmology as well.
Not recently. The in formalism, of course, has been used in cosmology for quite some time. It is just this one folded contour. But this can be generalized. You can have multiple folds, and when you want to, there are other things also, I think, which you probably didn't mention, which is that on these different folds you'll need multiple copies of the fields. So you need to include a multiplicity in your Hilbert space. You need many copies of the fields which live on these different time folds. You introduce some extra degeneracy, but that is the cost of actually doing the calculations you need to find out of time ordered correlators. So there is anyway. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, thank you.
Thank you so much.